You settle into the heavy carved wooden chair at the long table, your fingers trembling as they brush against the polished surface. The faint aroma of roasted meats and spiced wine lingers in the air. But you are not here to enjoy the feast. You are here to survive it. Hi, it's getting late here, almost midnight for me. What time is it where you are? Let me know in the comments if we're worlds apart. Tonight, as the world outside quiets down, settle in, let your muscles unwind, and allow your thoughts to drift as we journey into another often overlooked corner of the past. If you enjoy these quiet explorations, feel free to subscribe. That way, you'll always know when it's time to unwind with another story from history's hidden corners. Tonight, we transport you to the uneasy luxury of a medieval or Renaissance royal court, a place of opulence, intrigue, and, for you, deadly responsibility. You are the royal food taster. Yes, you. The human shield against poison, the silent guardian of the monarch's digestion. Your existence is defined by suspicion, sacrifice, and an unspoken dread that every bite might be your last. The flickering torches cast long shadows across the hall, illuminating platters heaped with delicacies, steaming venison, intricately layered pies, exotic fruits carted in from distant lands. But your senses are trained not on the pleasures of these dishes, but on their hidden dangers. As you breathe in, you can smell the rich, gamey aroma of the meat, mingled with a faint metallic tang you've come to dread. Is it the scent of the iron platter, or the presence of arsenic, artfully concealed within? You swallow, but not the food yet, just your fear. Your mornings begin not with leisure, but with paranoia. Long before the court assembles for the day's meals, you accompany the royal cooks into the cavernous kitchens below. The air here is thick with smoke, sweat, and the sharp bite of vinegar, a crude attempt at cleanliness. You watch as enormous cauldrons bubble and knives flash, and you know that any of these moments could be the last safe point before the food is altered. You glance at the kitchen boys and scullery maids, their faces grimy with soot, their eyes darting about. You know their secrets, bribes from foreign agents, whispered threats, promises of reward. All these could convince one of them to introduce a deadly tincture or a lethal mushroom into the meal you are about to test. The court above celebrates in finery, unaware that their merriment is built upon your silent daily gamble. Every time you lift a morsel to your lips, you are performing the most thankless of duties. If you succeed, no one notices. If you fail, well, you won't be around to witness their reaction. And so, with your pulse steadying, you lift the first bite of the king's roast to your mouth. It is time to earn your keep, and hope that tonight the chef had only culinary ambitions, not murderous ones. Let's begin your day. The early morning light barely penetrates the narrow, arrow-slit windows of the castle kitchen. You stand at the threshold, inhaling the mingled stench of old grease, burnt wood, and something sour, maybe wine gone to vinegar or milk curdled past salvation. The cooks are already hard at work, their movements hurried but precise, as if they too understand that every ingredient today could be the difference between life and death. Your first duty, as always, is inspection, not of the meal, but of the men and women who prepare it. You know their names, their families, their weaknesses, knowledge gleaned out of necessity, not affection. That kitchen boy with the lazy eye, for instance, his father is deep in gambling debt. And that scullery maid scrubbing a pig's carcass, her brother is imprisoned in a rival lord's dungeon. Desperation is as pungent here as the acrid smoke curling from the hearth. You approach the wooden chopping block where a haunch of venison awaits, marbled with fat and already studded with sprigs of rosemary. The cook's cleaver rises and falls with rhythmic inevitability. The meat is raw, slick to the touch. You lean closer, inhaling deeply, not for the aroma, but for any sign of tampering. Powdered arsenic can sometimes cling to the flesh in a barely perceptible dust, while certain mushroom poisons can infuse the meat with an earthy, deceptive sweetness. Satisfied, or at least unable to detect anything obvious, you nod to the cook. The preparation continues, but you remain near, watching as the ingredients are assembled. The spices, you note, are especially dangerous. Nutmeg and cinnamon mask the flavor of some of the deadliest toxins known to your time. You've heard tales of entire courts felled by a single dusting of white powder mistaken for sugar. As the hours pass, the kitchen grows hotter, the air thick and oppressive. Your tunic clings to your skin as you pace, always circling, always observing. You taste samples intermittently, not enough to kill you, not yet, but enough to provide a first line of defense. A sip of the mead, thick and sweet. A nibble of the dark bread, dense and flecked with seeds. Each test is a silent prayer that today, like the days before, your instincts will suffice to protect you. Above you, the court is awakening. You can already hear the shuffle of silk slippers in the corridors, the murmur of chambermaids preparing the royal garments, the faint strains of a lute in the great hall. Soon, the king will summon his meal. But before that happens, there is one final crucial step, the ceremonial tasting of the completed dishes. The moment when your body is truly placed between the monarch and death. You wipe your hands on your apron, steeling yourself for what comes next. The platters are arranged meticulously on the long oak table in the kitchen's antechamber. Silver lids cover steaming pheasants, pies encased in golden crusts, and delicate jellies shimmering like captured sunlight. But to you, these are not symbols of culinary artistry. They are potential instruments of death, each one requiring your careful, methodical assessment. The royal steward stands nearby, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes narrowed, as if daring you to miss something. He will not taste the food. That is your burden alone. The kitchen staff falls silent as you approach the first dish, a spiced lamprey pie. The fish coiled within the pastry, like a serpent waiting to strike. You cut a small wedge, noting how the juices run, how the scent rises, earthy, briny, with a hint of cloves. Your fingers hesitate for only a second before bringing the morsel to your mouth. The flavor is rich, almost overpowering, but your focus is not on taste. You search for bitterness, numbness, any telltale sign of aconite or hemlock. The moment stretches as your body processes the bite. Your tongue tingles. But is it the spice or something far worse? You wait. No convulsions. No searing pain. No darkness clouding your vision. You move on to the next dish, a compote of stewed fruits and candied nuts, sweet enough to conceal cyanide if one is careless. Another bite, another pause. Your heart beats steadily beneath your ribs, even as your mind races ahead to all the ways this could go wrong. Dish by dish, you proceed. The roasted peacock with its plumage still fanned in defiant display. The delicate blancmange quivering on its silver plate. The tureen of thick, savoury pottage. Each sample is a gauntlet you must pass. A small battle won against the ever-present spectre of poison. All the while, the steward watches, recording each taste in his ledger, noting the time of your consumption. They will not serve these dishes to the king until enough minutes have passed to observe your condition. You are the canary in the culinary coal mine. The final dish is always the wine. A deep red claret, swirling in the goblet as the steward tilts it toward you. You drink slowly, savouring the tannins and the faint hint of oak, but aware that wine is among the easiest to adulterate. A dose of belladonna or a slip of deadly nightshade could render even this fine vintage into your last libation. And now, the waiting begins. You sit in a plain chair by the kitchen wall, the bustle of the staff resuming around you as they prepare to carry the food upstairs. All eyes flicker in your direction occasionally, gauging your colour, your breath. Minutes pass, heavy and slow. Finally, the steward nods. You live, for now. The meal can proceed to the royal table. You follow the servants as they ascend the spiral stone staircase, their arms laden with the fruits of the kitchen's labour. The scent of roasted meats and spices intensifies in the narrow corridor, mingling with the musty chill of the ancient stones. Your own steps are measured, but your senses are on high alert. Even though you've already tasted every dish, the threat is far from over. In the great hall, sunlight pours through stained glass, casting fragmented colours across the vaulted ceiling and the long banquet table below. The courtiers are already assembled, their jewelled collars and embroidered silks catching the light as they murmur and laugh, oblivious to the invisible war you wage in their midst. The monarch, your monarch, sits at the head of the table, a figure of composed regality. But beneath that facade, is the same gnawing fear that fuels your every move. You stand just behind the king's right shoulder, as custom dictates, your posture upright, your expression neutral. The food is served with elaborate ceremony, the carving of the roast, the uncapping of the tureens, and each time a new platter is placed before the monarch, all eyes flick briefly to you. It is your role to taste again, this time in public, this time as performance. The master carver slices a portion of the venison, and you step forward, accepting the bite on a small silver fork. You place it in your mouth, chew slowly, then swallow, your face betraying nothing. The monarch watches you, not with affection, but with the detached interest one might give to a particularly useful hound. Seconds pass, no sign of distress. The king nods subtly and lifts his own fork, and so the meal unfolds, a slow, deliberate dance in which you are both participant and protector. Between courses, you stand silently, your hands clasped before you, your gaze sweeping the assembled nobles. You know the dangers do not end with the food. An assassin's blade could flash from behind a tapestry, or a cupbearer could pour from the wrong decanter. Your entire existence is an exercise in vigilance. As the meal progresses, you feel the familiar ache in your legs from standing motionless, the faint burn in your throat from too many rapid tastings. But you do not complain. You do not even flinch. To be a royal food taster is to live in the shadow of power, yet never truly possess it. To guard the sovereign's life at the cost of your own. And tonight, as the final course is cleared and the court erupts in laughter and song, you allow yourself the smallest of exhales. You have survived another day, but tomorrow it will all begin again. The great hall is nearly empty now, save for the servants clearing away the remnants of the feast. Silver goblets clink together as they are stacked, and the last of the flickering candles sputter in their holders. The laughter of the courtiers has faded down the long stone corridors, replaced by the low murmurs of attendants discussing tomorrow's duties. You stand in the alcove by the high windows, the cool night air brushing against your skin through the barely open shutter. The scent of the feast still lingers, the cloying sweetness of fruit compotes, the savoury residue of roasted meats. But beneath it all, there's something else. A scent you've come to know intimately. The cold, metallic whisper of danger, always present, always just out of sight. You let out a long breath, but you do not relax. Not yet. The meal may be over, but your role does not end with the last course. For as long as the monarch lives, you must remain ready, alert to threats beyond the table. Your stomach churns with the various samplings from the evening, a strange cocktail of flavours and textures mixing uneasily inside you. And though the food was expertly prepared, as always, your body does not fully trust it. How could it? Every mouthful was taken with the knowledge that it might have been laced with the invisible hand of death. The royal physician approaches you now, as he often does after meals. His expression is unreadable as he asks the standard questions. Do you feel lightheaded? Any numbness in your limbs? Shortness of breath? You answer in the negative, your voice steady, your pulse slow. But inwardly, you wonder, would you even know? Some poisons take hours, even days to manifest fully, creeping through the bloodstream with patient malevolence. The physician nods and moves on, satisfied for the moment that the monarch is safe, because you are still standing. You step quietly through the side passage, making your way back toward the modest chamber assigned to you near the kitchens. Unlike the opulent bedchambers of the nobility, your room is simple. A straw-stuffed mattress, a rough wooden chair, a basin for washing. No tapestries, no luxuries. After all, a food taster's comfort is secondary to their function. Sitting on the edge of the bed, you pull off your boots, the leather creaking in protest. Your legs are stiff from hours of standing, your throat dry from too many tastings. In the dim candlelight, you catch sight of your reflection in the small, tarnished mirror above the wash basin. The face staring back is pale, the eyes shadowed with the weight of your profession. You wonder, as you do every night, how long this life can continue. But there is no alternative. To be a royal food taster is to live on the cusp of death, to serve in silence and in fear. And as you blow out the candle, surrendering to the darkness, you know that tomorrow will bring another meal, another risk, and once again, the chance that your next taste could be your last. Sleep comes slowly, but when it does, it is deep and dreamless. Your dreams fade into the pale light of dawn, and as you awaken, the familiar knot tightens in your chest. Today, like every day, you must confront the ancient art of poisoning, a craft as old as royalty itself. It is said that where there is power, there is poison, lurking in the shadows of ambition. As you splash cold water on your face from the basin, the history of your profession plays silently in your mind, as it often does. You know the stories well. They are, in a way, your daily cautionary tales. The Romans perfected poison as both a weapon and a political tool. You think of Locusta, the infamous female poisoner of ancient Rome, who concocted lethal draughts for emperors and left a trail of corpses in her wake. Her victims never saw the danger coming, and neither did their food tasters, if they even had them. In the East, too, the craft thrived. The courts of medieval China and Japan were rife with powdered toxins, subtle venoms extracted from plants and creatures alike. The art of subtle assassination was cultivated as carefully as poetry or calligraphy. And closer to your own time, in the courts of Renaissance Italy and France, poisons became sophisticated instruments of statecraft. The Medici family, notorious patrons of both the arts and the dark sciences, were rumoured to have maintained apothecaries whose shelves overflowed with lethal tinctures. Arsenic, the inheritance powder, was especially favoured. Tasteless, odourless, and terrifyingly effective, you know that these poisons do not always kill instantly. Some cause agonizing sickness that can last for days, weeks even. Others create symptoms that mimic natural causes, allowing assassins to evade suspicion. This, of course, is why your role is indispensable. By risking your own body first, you make it possible for the monarch to dine in relative peace, a buffer against both immediate death and the slower, more insidious varieties. You dress quickly, pulling on the same well-worn tunic and belt, and make your way down to the kitchens, where the first preparations for breakfast are already underway. The smells of baking bread and boiling porridge fill the air, masking, but never erasing, your acute awareness of the ever-present possibility of poison. As you walk past the herb mistress, you glance at the bundles of rosemary, thyme, and sage hanging from the rafters. Beautiful, fragrant, and, depending on the hands that wield them, potentially lethal. Belladonna, foxglove, hemlock, all can be rendered into potent weapons with enough knowledge and intent. Your knowledge of these plants is not academic. It is survival. And so, with the day's first meal approaching, you resume your place in the quiet, ceaseless battle against unseen threats, armed only with your instincts, your training, and the hope that today will not be the day that your body fails to detect the hidden hand of death. The morning meal at court is a more subdued affair than the lavish feasts of evening, but the risks are no less real. You take your position by the sideboard as the servants lay out the offerings: freshly baked bread, soft cheese wrapped in linen, boiled eggs, cold cuts of yesterday's game, and an assortment of fruits glistening with dew. The monarch prefers simplicity in the mornings, a fact that some might see as a reprieve for you. But you know better. Simplicity offers fewer ingredients, yes, but also fewer barriers to concealment. A single slice of poisoned bread, a fruit injected with a lethal extract, a sliver of meat treated with a tasteless toxin, All could end not just your life, but that of your sovereign. You begin, as always, with the bread. You break a piece from the loaf, noting the crust's crispness, the yeasty aroma still warm from the oven. You chew slowly, alert to any hint of bitterness or unnatural dryness. Satisfied, you move to the cheese, slicing a small wedge with the knife that never leaves your side, then sampling a berry from the silver bowl of fruit. The royal steward, punctual as ever, watches impassively, his quill poised over the ledger to note the time of your tasting. Minutes must pass before the monarch can eat, time for any immediate reactions to reveal themselves. As you chew, your gaze flickers to the others in the room. The chamberlain, the cupbearer, the physician, all part of the intricate ballet of court life, all potential allies or adversaries. The politics of the court are as layered as the meals you taste, and every relationship is a possible vector for betrayal. The monarch enters then, clad in a robe of velvet and fur, acknowledging no one with more than the faintest tilt of the head. The courtiers bow low as the sovereign approaches the table, where the food you've already tested now awaits. The steward clears his throat softly, indicating that sufficient time has passed. You step back, folding your hands before you as the monarch reaches for a slice of bread, the very piece you sampled moments ago. As the monarch eats, you stand silently, ever watchful, your own stomach still turning slightly from the rapid succession of tastings. The court converses quietly around you, as if oblivious to the possibility that the serene, simple breakfast could so easily become the scene of a royal tragedy. But for now, all is well. And as the meal progresses, you prepare yourself, knowing that this was only the first act of another long, perilous day in the service of a sovereign who, though well-fed and safe, likely never truly considers the one life perpetually offered up before theirs. Yours. As you return to your chamber for a brief respite after breakfast, your mind drifts, as it often does, to the quiet, clinical knowledge you've acquired through sheer necessity. How poison affects the body, how it could, how it will, eventually, affect yours. You've seen it happen before, after all. A rival noble who fell convulsing at a banquet, froth forming at the corners of his mouth. A scullery maid doubled over in agony, her insides liquefied by a tincture meant for someone else. The court whispers of such deaths are always shrouded in euphemisms, a sudden illness, a tragic misfortune. But you know better. You've studied the signs, committed them to memory, because recognizing them is the difference between intervention and demise. The quick poisons are the easiest to fear. Cyanide, though rare in your world, acts with ruthless efficiency, severing life within minutes. Others, like strychnine, seize your muscles in violent spasms, leaving your body rigid and your mind horrifyingly aware until the very end. But it is the slow poisons that haunt your imagination the most. Arsenic, the favourite of courtiers and kings alike, accumulates in the body. A pinch here, a pinch there. At first, you might notice nothing more than a dull ache in the joints or a vague malaise. But then comes the pallor, the hair thinning, the skin erupting in ulcers. By the time the cause is suspected, it is far too late. Lead, too, lurks silently, leaching from the glazed pottery in which wine is sometimes served, or from the cosmetics favoured by the ladies of court. It dulls the mind, saps strength, and in time turns even the most formidable sovereign into a husk. You shake these thoughts from your head and wash your face in the cold basin water. It is no use dwelling on what may never come, or what might come without warning. Yet you cannot help but palpate your own body in quiet moments like these, pressing your fingertips into your abdomen, feeling for tenderness, watching for the bruises or discolorations that herald internal corruption. This hyper-awareness is as much a part of your profession as tasting the food itself. Some days you wonder if it is worse to fear a quick death, sudden and merciful, or the slow erosion of your health, invisible but inevitable. Your breathing slows. You know that this fear is both your prison and your shield. Without it, you might grow careless. You might trust too easily. You might, one day, accept a slice of pie or sip of wine without first considering who might have reason to see you, or your monarch, dead. And so you gather yourself, steadying your nerves as you lace your boots once more. The day is far from over. Soon, the midday meal will be prepared, and with it, a fresh gauntlet of dangers cloaked in pastry crusts, broths, and sweetmeats. You open your chamber door, stepping back into the labyrinth of stone corridors that lead toward the kitchens, toward duty, toward danger, toward another taste. By the time you reach the kitchens again, the sun is high above the castle battlements, its light filtering weakly through the narrow windows. Inside, the kitchen is already alive with activity. The rhythmic chopping of herbs, the hiss of fat meeting flame, the murmured instructions between cooks as they prepare the midday meal. You inhale deeply, sorting the layers of scent as you've learned to do. There is the hearty aroma of boiling beef stock, the pungent sting of onions being sliced, the faint floral sweetness of honey being drizzled over fruits. But as always, you are seeking not pleasure in these aromas, but anomalies, bitter undertones, acrid sharpness, anything that signals the hand of a poisoner. The steward greets you with a brief nod, handing you the day's meal list, neatly inked and sealed. You scan it quickly, noting the usual fare: a meat pottage, stewed greens, a selection of cheeses and bread, a fruit tart for dessert. Simple, familiar dishes. But you know well that it is often in the familiar where danger hides best. You approach the hearth, where a cook is stirring the pottage in a great iron cauldron. The steam billows up in warm, fragrant clouds, but you move closer, leaning over to catch any unnatural aroma. The cook offers you a ladleful. You blow on it gently, then take a cautious sip. Salt, herbs, marrow-rich broth. Nothing immediately alarming. Yet you linger for a moment, watching as the cook ladles portion after portion into serving vessels, ensuring there is no switch, no sleight of hand. Moving on, you taste the bread, then the cheese. The cheese is soft, almost buttery, with a rind dusted in ash. It could easily conceal a bitter additive, but your tongue detects nothing beyond the nutty tang of well-aged dairy. Finally, the tart. You cut into its golden crust, noting the glistening red of stewed cherries within. You taste a small bite, your mind alert to the possibility of cherry pits left whole. A crude but sometimes effective way to deliver cyanogenic compounds, but the fruit is soft, sweet, innocent. You exhale slowly, signaling your preliminary approval. The servants gather the dishes, preparing to ascend to the great hall. Once again, as dictated by custom, you will accompany the food, ready to perform the final public tasting before the monarch lifts a single fork. You glance at the clock tower beyond the kitchen's narrow window. The day is moving on, but your task remains as static as ever. Taste, survive, repeat. And so, adjusting your belt and straightening your posture, you prepare yourself for the second performance of the day. Another tightrope walk across the thin line that separates your continued existence from a silent, inglorious end. The great hall hums with conversation as you enter, trailing just behind the servants who bear the midday meal. The clatter of cutlery and the low buzz of courtiers discussing matters of state create a deceptive atmosphere of ease. But beneath it all, you sense the same undercurrent of tension that accompanies every dining occasion in the court. The monarch is already seated, a robe of embroidered velvet draped casually over one arm, eyes flickering disinterestedly over the room, as if the entire event is beneath their notice. But you know better. You've seen the subtle signs, the faint hesitation before taking a bite, the occasional glance toward your place at their side. Power makes people paranoid, and for good reason. You take your position beside the steward as the first platters are uncovered. The rich aroma of the pottage wafts upward, thick and comforting, belying the potential dangers it might conceal. Without hesitation, you accept the spoon offered by the steward and ladle a small portion into your own bowl. The room quiets slightly as you raise the spoon to your lips. It is not a dramatic silence, just a subtle shift in attention. The collective awareness that this moment is a ritual as essential as any prayer. You taste, swallow, and pause. No burning sensation, no numbing of the tongue, no sudden vertigo. You nod slightly, and the monarch signals for the meal to proceed. As the rest of the dishes are presented, the stewed greens, the bread, the tart, you repeat the same process, your movements practiced, almost mechanical. But inside, your mind is anything but tranquil. You are cataloguing every taste, every bodily reaction, hyper-aware of the slight variations in your own physiology. A bead of sweat rolls down your spine as you stand there, hands clasped before you, observing the monarch's first bites. The courtiers chatter away, oblivious to how close death always hovers in these moments. You wonder, as you often do, if they ever consider that the feast could end not in satisfied sighs and wiped mouths, but in spasms, seizures, and screams. But for now, the meal proceeds as it always does. Gracefully, elegantly, with no hint of the unseen dangers you have once again deflected. As the servants clear the plates and the monarch retires to their afternoon chamber, you follow at a discreet distance, the ritual completed for now. But you know that this is only one cycle in an endless loop. Dinner will come soon enough, and with it, another opportunity for someone to attempt the unthinkable. The afternoon sun casts long slants of light across the stone corridors as you make your way back to your chamber. Between meals, the court buzzes with political maneuverings, clandestine rendezvous, and whispered alliances. But for you, these hours are defined by waiting and vigilance. You sit on the rough stool by your narrow window, watching the dust motes drift lazily in the amber light. From somewhere distant in the castle, the faint strains of a lute drift through the air, mingling with the soft shuffle of servants preparing for the evening's banquet. The day has its own rhythm here, as relentless as the tide, and you are caught in its perpetual flow. You let your gaze wander over the courtyard below. The knights spar in measured mechanical movements, their armor clanking dully as they exchange blows. The kitchen boys dart from cellar to hall, baskets of produce slung over their shoulders. And above them all, the banners of the royal house snap and twist in the breeze, indifferent to the quiet terror that defines your existence. There are moments, like this one, when you allow yourself to imagine another life. One where each meal is not a gamble, where your body is not a constant testing ground for hidden malice. Perhaps you might have been a farmer, tending to rows of wheat under the open sky, or a merchant, hawking wares in some bustling market square, your greatest risk being a poor deal or a pickpocket's nimble fingers. But such fantasies are fleeting. A sharp knock at your chamber door returns you to the present. You rise swiftly, instinctively straightening your tunic as the steward enters. He says nothing at first, merely handing you the list of dishes being prepared for the evening banquet. You scan it quickly. Roast swan, spiced pears, a game pie with juniper berries, almond custard. Elaborate, luxurious, and all potential weapons. The steward leaves without further word, trusting that you know your duty, as you always do. You set the parchment on your desk and exhale slowly. Another feast awaits, another gauntlet to run. Your fingers trace the edge of your tasting knife. Small, plain, but sharp. A tool as much for practicality as for reassurance. It has accompanied you through countless meals, a constant in a life defined by uncertainty. You rise and make your way to the kitchens once more, descending the spiral staircase, the familiar chill of the stone walls pressing in around you. The scent of roasting meat already reaches you from below, mingling with the faint aroma of cloves and nutmeg. Even now, after all these years, your stomach knots with the same apprehension as it did the first time you assumed this role. But you walk on, steady, resolute. For this is what it means to be a royal food taster, to exist in the spaces between trust and fear, between life and death, between each and every bite. The kitchen is transformed for the evening banquet, alive with the orchestrated chaos of cooks, scullions and stewards, weaving between tables laden with ingredients. The air is thick with the mingling scents of roasting fowl, candied fruits, and the sharper, more dangerous tang of spices imported from distant lands. You stand at the threshold, taking in the scene like a general surveying a battlefield. The head cook approaches, wiping his brow with a flour-dusted sleeve. He gestures toward the array of dishes in various stages of completion. The swan, its feathers painstakingly plucked and then reaffixed for presentation. The game pie, its crust adorned with intricate patterns of leaves and vines. The custard, smooth and pale, resting in delicate ceramic bowls. These are not mere meals, you know, but performances. Every dish an opportunity for the court to display its wealth, its sophistication, and, for you, an opportunity for someone to make a statement far more deadly. You step closer to the preparation table, eyeing the bundles of spices laid out in neat rows, saffron threads like molten gold, peppercorns as dark as midnight, cinnamon sticks curled tight as secrets. Any of these could be a carrier of poison, their strong flavors masking the presence of something far more sinister. You run your hand above the trays of ingredients, not touching, but observing, sensing. Your role is not to trust, but to verify. The cook offers you a small slice of the game pie for pre-tasting. You accept, slicing into the flaky crust and revealing the tender, spiced meat within. The aroma is heady, rich with juniper and a hint of clove. You take a cautious bite, chewing slowly, your senses alert to any trace of bitterness or chemical tang. But the flavors blend harmoniously, complex yet natural. You nod and move on. The custard is next. A smooth spoonful, creamy and subtly sweet. Harmless, or so it seems. Yet you know better than to ever believe in appearances. As the final dishes are assembled, you oversee the plating, ensuring that what leaves the kitchen is precisely what was prepared. Substitution, after all, is one of the oldest tricks in the poisoner's playbook. The servants lift the platters, their arms steady beneath the weight of expectation and danger. You follow, ascending once more toward the great hall, where the nobles gather in anticipation of another evening of opulence. Another evening in which your presence is the only thing standing between the monarch's pleasure and their demise. You square your shoulders, your face composed, your body prepared. The performance is about to begin again. The great hall is resplendent in the flickering candlelight, the walls draped in tapestries depicting heroic battles and ancient myths, the long table adorned with silver candelabras, crystal goblets, and heaping platters of food. The assembled nobles, their garments shimmering with gold thread and precious gems, murmur amongst themselves, their voices rising and falling in a symphony of courtly intrigue. At the head of the table, the monarch sits, a serene mask of authority, over a body no doubt as tense as your own. The steward signals to you as the first course is placed before the sovereign. The roast swan, resplendent in its artificial plumage, its beak lacquered to a dull sheen. You approach with measured steps, accepting a small carved piece from the master carver, the flesh dark and aromatic beneath the crisped skin. Raising it to your lips, you chew methodically, tasting for any hint of wrongness beneath the layers of flavor. The monarch watches, their expression impassive. You swallow and stand motionless for a moment. Nothing. The monarch nods and the feast begins in earnest, the hall filling with the sounds of conversation, laughter, and the occasional clink of a knife against a plate. But for you, the sounds are distant. Your focus narrows to the food, the sovereign's every movement, the subtle shifts in the demeanor of those seated nearby. As each course is served, the spiced pears, the game pie, the custard, you repeat your ritual, tasting, pausing, observing. The nobles toast with goblets of wine, oblivious to the invisible war you fight on their behalf. And as the evening stretches on, the hall growing warmer, the air thick with the mingled scents of food, perfume, and candle wax, you remain steadfast, a silent guardian in the midst of decadence. A reminder that even here, amidst opulence and splendor, death is never far away. As the final course is cleared away and the courtiers drift toward their evening amusements, gambling, music, quiet conspiracies, you remain at your post, as always, watching the monarchs sip the last of their wine. The steward records the time of the final tasting, his quills scratching softly against parchment. A ritual completed, a duty fulfilled. The monarch stands, signaling the end of the feast, and the nobles rise in choreographed deference. You remain seated for a moment longer, your hands resting lightly on the edge of the table, fingers splayed as if to anchor yourself to the solid wood beneath you. Only when the monarch exits through the private door behind the dais do you finally allow yourself a slow exhale. The servants descend upon the table like crows, clearing the remnants of the lavish meal, half-eaten meats, discarded bones, the stained linen napkins. You rise and make your way toward the kitchen, your steps deliberate, though your body is beginning to feel the familiar fatigue. The dull ache in your legs, the faint pressure behind your eyes from hours of hypervigilance. Back in the kitchens, the fires have burned low, the air thick with the residue of grease and smoke. The head cook gives you a brief, respectful nod as you pass, an acknowledgement between professionals, each with their own burdens. The dishes have been served, no catastrophes today, no sudden deaths at the table. Another night survived. You return to your chamber, the narrow stone passageways echoing faintly with the sounds of the court still alive above. A lute being tuned, a woman's laugh trailing through the corridor, the muffled clatter of a servant's hurried steps. Life continues its elaborate dance, oblivious to how near death always lurks at its edges. Once in your room, you sit heavily on the bed, peeling off your boots and rubbing your sore ankles. Your mind, however, does not quiet as easily. Even now, with the feast concluded, you find yourself replaying each taste, each swallow, each uncertain moment when you waited for a reaction that never came. The question gnaws at you, as it always does. Will it be tomorrow? The next feast? Or some quiet, unsuspecting morning when your guard slips for just a second too long? You stare at the small wooden box on the table by your bed, the one where you keep the simple tools of your trade. The tasting knife, the tiny silver spoon, the vial of vinegar used to detect certain toxins. You consider them for a long moment, then close the box with a soft click, extinguishing the candle beside it. Lying back, you feel the heaviness of your body, the ache of a day's work well done, or at least a day's work that didn't end in your own demise. As sleep begins to pull you under, you think, not for the first time, of the irony of your existence. You are essential, yet expendable, always present, yet deliberately invisible. And above all, you know this with chilling certainty. The feast may be over, but the danger never is. Sleep eludes you for longer than you'd like, your mind tracing back through history, unspooling the ancient threads that led to your peculiar profession. For though the specifics change, kingdoms rise and fall, dynasties crumble, the need for someone like you remains eternal. You think of ancient Persia, where it is said the royal tasters first became institutionalized, a formal safeguard woven into the very fabric of the court. There, the food guardians were not mere servants but honored, if ill-fated fixtures in the palace hierarchy. Their task, to shield the emperor from the silent, invisible assassin's hand. In imperial China, the practice took on even more elaborate forms. Entire regiments of tasters rotated through the Forbidden City's kitchens, each trained in the subtle art of detection, though few ever lived long enough to master it fully. Legends tell of palace eunuchs who doubled as tasters, their loyalty ensured by their severed ties to family and ambition. Even the great Julius Caesar is rumoured to have employed a personal food taster, though whether this afforded him any real security is doubtful. After all, his end came not by poison, but by blades wielded by men he called friends. The profession you embody is as old as power itself, and the motivations behind it are as timeless as human nature. Ambition, fear, envy, revenge. You think of the many poisons devised over the centuries, crafted not in the rush of battle, but in the quiet, patient hands of apothecaries and alchemists. Their deadly concoctions honed through trial and error, their victims often nameless, forgotten. It is this legacy that you inherit each time you lift a fork to your lips, not just the practical duty of safeguarding your sovereign, but the entire history of human suspicion and cunning distilled into your role. And yet, despite this long lineage, you are afforded no special honors, no titles, no lands, no place in the songs sung by the court's minstrels. Your reward is survival, nothing more. As you finally drift into a restless sleep, your last thought is as bitter as any poison. History remembers the kings, the queens, the assassins. Rarely does it remember the taster. The next morning arrives quietly, the pale light filtering through the leaded windows of the palace kitchen as you resume your post. Another day, another meal that could be your last. The familiar clink of copper pots and the low murmur of cooks barely register as your thoughts are consumed by an invisible adversary, the poisons that might lurk within each dish. You've become intimately familiar with the most infamous members of the poisoner's arsenal. There is arsenic, deceptively tasteless, slipping undetected into wine or stew, its effects insidious, violent cramps, convulsions, and then the cold embrace of death. The powder could be hidden in sugar, sprinkled across fruit, or stirred into honey. It is a favorite of those who wish to feign natural illness. Then there's cyanide, the bitter almond scent perceptible only to a rare few. A single dose could cause death in minutes, leaving behind the telltale red flush of oxygen-starved blood. You've trained yourself to detect the faintest hint of that almond aroma, but still, it is a game of chance. Hemlock too haunts your mind. Less common in royal courts, but no less lethal, its paralytic effects are merciless. Muscles seize, lungs grow still. You imagine the ancient Greeks, stoic philosophers sipping the fatal brew with calm resolve. You doubt you would show the same composure. Then there are the more exotic poisons. Aconite, known as wolfsbane, with its deceptively beautiful purple flowers, or belladonna, the beautiful lady, once used by noblewomen to dilate their pupils, but just as easily employed to slow a heart to stillness. The thought of such beauty doubling as a death sentence unsettles you deeply. And the worst? The slow poisons. The ones that don't strike with dramatic immediacy, but wear you down over days or weeks. Lead-laced powders that accumulate imperceptibly in the body, causing a gradual descent into madness, organ failure, and eventual death, while leaving little evidence for the healers to uncover. Every meal could contain one of these, or a mixture of several, concocted by a clever assassin to avoid detection. Perhaps a loyal kitchen boy has been bribed, or a scullery maid holds a silent grudge. The cook himself could be compromised, his smile masking deadly intent. You cannot trust the food. You cannot trust the people. Your only defense is vigilance, your palate sharpened not for pleasure, but for survival. Each taste is a test of your knowledge, your intuition, your nerve. And yet, as you swallow each bite, you must conceal all trace of fear. The king watches, his court watches. A flicker of hesitation could mean punishment, or worse, replacement. You've seen others dismissed for lesser mistakes, their fates sealed not by poison, but by royal decree. So you continue, mouthful after mouthful, navigating the elaborate choreography of taste and pretense. As you clear the last dish of the morning, you suppress the familiar ache in your stomach, unsure if it's hunger, anxiety, or something more sinister beginning to take hold. And with that uncertainty, you prepare for the next course, and whatever hidden dangers it might contain. You approach each meal with the precision of a priest preparing for a sacred rite, though your altar is a banquet table, and your sacraments could kill you. It is not enough to simply taste the food. There is a strict ritual, an unspoken choreography that must be performed perfectly, lest suspicion arise or mistakes slip through. First, the bread. Always the bread. Its porous crumb and crust could conceal powdered toxins, or the baker's hand could have been guided by ill intent. You tear off a piece with a steady motion, inspecting the interior for signs of tampering, discoloration, an odd odor. But of course, poison is rarely so generous as to make itself known. You place it on your tongue, chew slowly, deliberately, allowing the flavors to unfold. The yeasty tang, the crunch of the crust, normal, familiar. And then you swallow, silently, already assessing your body's reaction. No immediate burning, no tightening in your throat. Next, the meat, usually brought in with great ceremony, perhaps a haunch of venison or a delicate game bird, its skin glazed to a perfect sheen. Here, your eyes scan for unnatural colours, your nose for acrid undertones beneath the richness of the fat. A careful slice, then another measured bite. You taste, you chew, you wait. Your senses are always on high alert, but your expression must remain serene, unbothered. The courtiers are watching, always watching, for any sign of distress or hesitation. Your life depends on appearing unafraid, as much as it depends on your actual skill. Then, the sauces and the wines. These are often the most dangerous, for liquids absorb poisons effortlessly. A drop of opium, a dusting of arsenic, a single crushed berry from a deadly nightshade, none would alter the appearance of a velvety reduction or a goblet of claret. You swirl the wine in its cup, noting the legs it leaves on the glass, inhaling deeply for any scent that doesn't belong. Another sip, another silent prayer. You know that poisons can be delayed in their effects. Some will not betray their presence for hours, even days. Yet the ritual demands immediate verification, a superficial assurance that the meal is safe, even when it may not be. It is ultimately a performance, for the king, for the court, and for yourself. You finish each dish, clean your mouth with a linen napkin, and step back, allowing the servants to present the same food to your sovereign. He does not look at you. He never does. Your presence is a necessity, not a comfort. And so the king eats, trusting in your stomach more than in your loyalty. That trust, more fragile than the finest porcelain, is your only true protection. As the plates are cleared and the kitchen prepares for the next course, you feel the familiar fatigue seep into your bones. Not from hunger, but from the relentless vigilance required by this role. A role in which a single misstep, a single failure to perform, could spell disaster. And tomorrow you will do it all again. Even when the meal concludes without incident, the anxiety does not release its grip. You sit in your modest quarters, hours later, tracing every small sensation in your body. Was that faint ache in your belly the sign of something sinister? Was your heart racing faster than usual? Or was it simply the residue of fear, the familiar hum of stress that never fully subsides? Poison does not always announce itself with immediate violence. Many of the deadliest toxins prefer a slower, more insidious path. First, a subtle discomfort, then a creeping weakness, and finally a collapse that feels almost like sleep. Some of the most cunning assassins know this, using compounds that mimic natural illnesses, delaying their effects to throw off suspicion. You have seen men felled days after a seemingly harmless meal, their deaths attributed to bad air or a sudden fever, when in truth, the assassin's work was done long before. This lingering uncertainty is your truest companion. No matter how many meals you survive, the possibility of an undetectable, delayed poison remains. You live in a perpetual state of postponed death, always wondering if the fatal dose is already working its way through your veins, unnoticed until it is far too late. The court physicians, with their limited remedies and crude antidotes, offer little comfort. You know their leeches and powders are as likely to hasten your demise as to prevent it. Some poisons, after all, have no antidote at all. Knowledge of such substances circulates quietly among apothecaries and scholars, but those who wield poisons skillfully are always one step ahead of those who attempt to counter them. And so you cultivate an intimate relationship with your own body, becoming acutely attuned to its rhythms and changes. A skipped heartbeat, a bead of sweat, a dry throat, all demand investigation. All could be omens. But you also know the danger of imagining symptoms where none exist, of spiraling into hypochondria. That way lies madness, and madness is a luxury you cannot afford. The king does not pay you to be nervous. He pays you to be vigilant. At night, when you finally recline on your straw mattress, sleep does not come easily. Instead, you replay the day's meal in your mind. The ingredients, The flavors, the textures, the expressions of those who prepared the food. Did the cook seem different? Was the steward's glance a little too long? Every interaction is a potential clue or a potential distraction from the real threat. Your life, you realize, is not so much a series of meals as it is a series of tests, each one passed with a combination of instinct, training, and most of all, luck. And luck, you know, is a finite resource. As you finally drift into a fitful sleep, the same thought lingers as it always does. Tomorrow's meal might be your last. The kitchen is a place few in the court dare to enter, but for you, it is both a workplace and a battlefield. You walk its narrow corridors daily, your senses sharpened, your mind cataloguing each smell, each sound, each face. It is not the comforting place of warmth and abundance that outsiders might imagine. No, the royal kitchen is a chaotic and dangerous labyrinth, a crucible where heat, blades, and ambition combine in unpredictable ways. Fires roar in open hearths, filling the air with smoke and the sharp tang of scorched fat. Cooks shout over one another, their knives flashing in rapid strokes as they butcher and chop with practiced precision. The clatter of pots and the hiss of boiling liquids create a constant, discordant symphony. But beneath this surface of culinary artistry lies a darker truth. Every hand that touches the king's food is a potential threat. The cook who seasons the stew, the scullion who washes the vegetables, the steward who carries the platter to the hall. Each one could be bribed, coerced, or harbour a personal vendetta. Some may resent the king's taxes, others may owe their loyalty to a rival noble house, and still others may act out of sheer desperation. You cannot trust any of them, and so part of your role extends beyond mere tasting. You must observe, assess, and sometimes even interrogate. You ask casual questions. How long has that ham been curing? Who prepared the sauces today? Was there a delivery of new spices? Always with a tone of feigned indifference, never revealing the depth of your scrutiny. You watch for small deviations, a dish that appears too soon, a missing servant, an ingredient that was not on yesterday's manifest. Even the choice of plate or goblet can betray a plot. Poison hidden in the glaze of a cup, or a particular herb introduced to mask the taste of something more lethal. The kitchen staff fear you, though they may not show it. They know that your failure could mean their deaths as well. In some courts, entire brigades of cooks have been executed following a successful poisoning, regardless of their involvement. And so they walk the same tightrope of survival as you do, their loyalty enforced not by affection, but by the knowledge of what failure entails. You cannot help but admire, in a grim way, the ingenuity required to poison someone in this environment. The challenge is immense, the risks extreme, but still, attempts are made. The stakes are simply too high to deter the truly determined. As you leave the kitchen and return to the great hall, the smells of roasted meats and fragrant herbs clinging to your clothes, you understand that the most dangerous place in the palace is not the throne room, but here, amid the pots, the knives, and the hidden motives. To survive in your profession, you have learned that it is not enough to guard against poison. You must understand the mind that would employ it. Poisoners are not like other assassins. They do not seek the thrill of the kill or the glory of open confrontation. No, their art is subtler, more patient, a calculated erosion of trust that begins long before the first drop of venom touches a chalice or seeps into a roast. You often wonder what kind of mind chooses such a method. Is it cowardice that leads them to strike from the shadows? Or is it perhaps a higher form of cunning, the choice of someone who understands that the most enduring power is wielded quietly, invisibly? After all, a blade can be parried, but a poison may already be too deep within you before you even know you are under attack. You have come to think of poisoners not as killers, but as architects of death. They design their plots with precision, considering not just the substance they will use, but the psychology of their victim, the habits of the household, the rhythms of the kitchen. They are patient, often waiting weeks or months for the perfect opportunity, for the moment when defense is lower, when suspicion has dulled. In the quiet hours, when you are alone with your thoughts, you map out their possible strategies in your mind. Would they slip something into the wine cask, knowing how often it is shared? Or would they target a specific ingredient, confident that it would be served to the king alone? Would they favor a rapid toxin for immediate effect, or something slow and wasting, allowing plausible deniability? You study ancient texts and modern treatises alike, learning of plants that wither the heart, fungi that paralyze the lungs, minerals that erode the mind. But more than that, you study the court itself, the alliances, the rivalries, the unspoken enmities. Poison is never just about the substance, it is about motive. The poisoner must believe that the risk is worth the reward. And so you ask yourself daily, who stands to gain from the king's death? Whose fortunes would rise? Whose grievances burn hot enough to justify such a perilous act? These questions are as essential to your survival as any antidote. You sometimes imagine confronting your would-be assassin, standing face to face with the person who tried to kill not just the king, but you as well. What would you see in their eyes? Remorse, defiance, or perhaps nothing at all, just the cold detachment of someone who sees life and death as mere moves in a game of power. But such confrontations are rare. Most poisoners vanish before their crime is discovered, or they are quietly disposed of by the king's enforcers. Often, the truth never emerges, and the death is attributed to fate, illness, or divine will. And so you sharpen your mind as much as your senses, knowing that your greatest weapon is not your tongue or your taste, but your ability to anticipate the invisible hand that might one day reach for you through a simple bowl of soup. Not all poisons kill swiftly. Some are patient, almost gentle in their cruelty. They work slowly, day by day, slipping past your vigilance with the ease of a sigh. You know these poisons well. You have felt their symptoms in others: the slight pallor, the unexplained weakness, the appetite that fades without cause. At first, they seem like nothing at all. A common illness perhaps, fatigue from court duties. But then the cough deepens, the hair begins to fall, the weight drops away. And by the time anyone realizes, it is too late. These poisons are not meant to shock. They are designed to mimic nature, to allow the poisoner to stand at the funeral with dry eyes, offering false condolences. Their success lies in their silence. You think of arsenic, sometimes called the inheritance powder, tasteless, odorless, and slow. A favorite among those who crave wealth or power, but fear discovery. A small dose in the wine, repeated over weeks. Eventually, the victim wastes away, and the culprit walks free. Then there are the organic poisons, the extracts from plants and fungi, hemlock, aconite, foxglove, all with their own unique signatures, their own tempos of death. Some cause heart failure, others induce paralysis, leaving the victim aware but unable to cry for help. You have studied them all, committed their effects to memory. In your role, time is both ally and enemy. A swift poison can be detected, the symptoms are immediate, but a slow one requires vigilance over days, even weeks. You must observe not just the taste, but the subtle changes in the king's health, his complexion, his moods, his breath. Sometimes you find yourself doubting, is that fatigue real? Or is it the first symptom? Is that stomach pain a result of last night's feast, or the beginning of something far worse? The uncertainty eats at you. It keeps you awake at night, long after the candles have burned low. You replay each meal in your mind, searching for a missed sign, a hidden taste. And yet, you must not show your worry. Your calm is part of your duty. If the king senses fear in you, it will only deepen his own. So you maintain your composure, even as your mind races with possibilities. In the quiet moments, you marvel at the poisoner's patience. To watch someone suffer, knowing you caused it, yet saying nothing. That is a particular kind of cruelty. One you hope never to understand fully, but you must respect it, because it is precisely that patience that makes your adversary so dangerous. And so, each day, You renew your own patience, watching, waiting, guarding against the slow poisons that threaten not just the king, but you as well. You wake before dawn, as always. The tools of your trade are laid out before you, simple yet essential. A silver spoon, a small, unassuming knife, a set of finely crafted cups, each polished to a mirror's shine. These are not weapons, but they are your only line of defense. You have learned to trust your senses more than anything else. Your eyes must detect the faintest discoloration in a sauce. Your nose must pick up the slightest off note in a wine's bouquet. Your tongue must be sensitive to even the most delicate bitterness, the subtlest metallic tang. But even your senses can be deceived. Some poisons are clever, disguised perfectly within the food's natural flavors. Others are masked by the chef's heavy hand. Garlic, spices, or salt used not for taste, but to conceal something far more sinister. That is where your training comes in. Years spent memorizing the signs. Not just what poison tastes like, but how it behaves. The way certain oils separate on the surface of a broth. The unnatural slickness left behind by some powders. The dull ache that may form in your throat after only a single bite. Your tools help. The silver spoon is not just for elegance. Silver tarnishes in the presence of certain toxins, giving you a small but critical warning. The knife allows you to cut into dishes, exposing hidden layers where a malicious hand may have placed something lethal. The cups are for portioning, ensuring you consume only a controlled amount when tasting. Enough to test, but, hopefully, not enough to kill. You have learned the rituals well. Before each meal, you approach the table with deliberate calm. You inspect the food visually first. You inhale its aroma slowly, seeking anything unusual. Then, and only then, do you allow yourself a small taste. The courtiers watch you closely during these moments, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and silent dread. They see you as both protector and sacrifice. They know that if you falter, if you fall, it will be their turn to mourn, or perhaps to scheme. The king watches too, though he hides it better. His life rests on your judgment, but he rarely acknowledges it. That is how it must be. You are a tool, nothing more. Sometimes you wonder if your own tools will be enough, if your senses, sharpened though they are, can truly keep you safe against all the cunning that human malice can muster. But you have no choice. This is your role, your tools, your instincts. They are your armor. Thin, perhaps, fragile. But they are all that stand between you and a slow, silent death. And so, with a steady hand, you pick up the spoon, the knife, the cup. Another meal awaits. Another test. Each meal is a ritual. A performance as precise as any staged in the grand theatre halls, yet yours is conducted in silence, in the steady rhythm of practice motions. You stand by the table, eyes scanning each dish as it is laid before the king. The servants retreat, leaving you alone in this intimate, dangerous space. You can feel the weight of every gaze, though none meet your eyes directly. They prefer not to acknowledge the possibility of what could unfold here. You begin with the bread, tearing a small piece from the loaf's crust. It is warm, fresh, harmless, or so it seems. You sniff it gently, press it between your fingers to test its texture. Then you place a fragment upon your tongue, allowing it to linger for a moment longer than comfort permits. No bitterness, no strange film. You swallow, one breath, two. Your pulse remains steady. Next is the soup, a rich broth, its surface shimmering with fat. But you know that beauty can be deceptive. You skim your spoon along the edge, noting the consistency, observing how the droplets gather and separate. Slowly, you taste. The warmth spreads down your throat, and you wait. Every muscle poised for signs of distress. A tightening chest, a burning tongue, a sudden wave of nausea. None come. The king watches from his high-backed chair, silent. He never asks how you are. He never needs to. If something were amiss, he would know soon enough. You move on, Methodically, to the meats, the sauces, the confections, each is subjected to the same quiet scrutiny. Taste, pause, breathe. It is not the food you fear, though sometimes the richness of it, the excess, is enough to unsettle your stomach, but the unknown hands that have prepared it. The cook is trusted, of course, the kitchen staff carefully vetted, but trust is a currency spent cheaply in a place like this. You know that ambition, jealousy, revenge, all find their expression in these small, simple things. A dusting of powder, a drop of oil, a sliver of something unseen. As you progress through the courses, you become aware of how this ritual defines your existence. Not merely an act of service, but one of survival. A daily reckoning with mortality, performed under the guise of decorum and routine. When at last the meal is declared safe and you step aside, the king begins to eat without hesitation, as he always does. No word of thanks passes his lips. None is expected. You withdraw quietly, your heart still beating steadily beneath your ribs. Once again, you have passed the test. Once again, death has been denied. For now. But you know that tomorrow, the ritual will repeat. It always does. In your quieter moments, when the candles burn low and the corridors fall silent, your thoughts drift to the many tools of the poisoner's trade. Not all dangers arrive with a sword's flash or an assassin's dagger. Some seep in slowly, invisible and patient. You know them by name, by texture, by their telltale scents, or lack thereof. Arsenic, pale and tasteless, favoured by those who wish their deeds to go unnoticed. A pinch stirred into wine, and hours later, the victim's organs would twist themselves into knots. Then there is hemlock, with its distinctive smell, earthy and strange. Crude and painful, it betrays its user with convulsions and violent seizures. You have seen its effects described in old texts, the cold efficiency with which it silences a body, and of course the infamous nightshade, belladonna, beautiful to behold, with dark berries and delicate blossoms. But behind that beauty lies a toxin that can dilate pupils, induce hallucinations, and in sufficient measure, stop a heart. You know these substances, not because you use them, but because you must recognize them. It is part of your training, this grim education in death. The alchemists and apothecaries who crafted these poisons treated them as an art. Each mixture carefully measured, each effect studied. Some poisons kill quickly, others slowly. Some make their victims suffer, others offer the mercy of a swift end. The choice often reflects not just the poisoner's intent, but their message. A lingering death, stretched over days, speaks of revenge. A sudden, untraceable demise speaks of cold strategy. You imagine the hands that prepare these poisons, steady, deliberate, committed. Hands, not unlike your own, perhaps. That is the unsettling part. How thin the line is between protector and predator. Even the innocuous can be deadly. A dish of mushrooms, harmless in appearance, might harbour a hidden killer. A sweet-smelling oil might coat the handle of a cup. The very air could be laced with venom if dispersed cleverly enough. Your vigilance, then, extends beyond taste alone. You watch how the food is served, who enters the kitchen, who lingers too long near the king's table. You notice the subtle shifts in behaviour, the unusual silences, the eyes that avoid your gaze. It is a wearying vigilance, but it is necessary. For every poison you know, there are others yet to be discovered. New concoctions, new methods, devised by minds as cunning as any generals. And in the end, you are not just guarding the king from these threats, you are guarding yourself. Because if you fail, there will be no time for regret. Each day, the ritual repeats itself with quiet precision. From the moment you rise, your mind is already anticipating the day's meals. Not as nourishment, but as trials. You dress carefully, your garments chosen not for comfort but for ease of movement. Your senses must remain sharp, unencumbered by heavy fabrics or distracting adornments. As you approach the royal kitchens, the familiar medley of smells, roasting meats, stewed vegetables, baked breads, greets you. Yet for you, these are not invitations to feast, but warnings. Before the food reaches the king's table, it first passes through you. Not everything. No one could taste every morsel, but enough to serve as a barrier, a shield of flesh between sovereign and schemer. The process is methodical. First, you observe the preparation. You note the ingredients, the hands that handle them, the sequence of their assembly. You stand silently at the periphery, eyes tracing every motion, every pour, every cut. Then comes the tasting. A servant presents a small portion of the dish. It is placed before you, sometimes with a bow, sometimes with averted eyes. You pick up the utensil, the metal cool against your fingers, and you taste. The first moment is always the same. A brief pause, your senses attuned to any bitterness, any strange texture, any telltale heat that does not belong. Then you wait. Sometimes minutes pass in silence, the courtiers around you feigning disinterest, though all are quietly attentive. If you show no sign of distress, the dish proceeds to the king's table. If you falter, even slightly, it is removed, discarded, and the kitchens fall into frantic disarray. You have learned to master your expressions. Even the most benign discomfort, a stray peppercorn caught in your throat, must be suppressed. A cough could mean panic. A grimace could incite suspicion. Each meal is a performance, your body the stage upon which life and death are daily rehearsed. And yet, the audience, the royal court, rarely acknowledges your role. You are as much a fixture of the dining hall as the candelabras or the tapestries. Present, essential, but overlooked. Over time, the act becomes muscle memory. Your mind may drift, your eyes may wander to the stained glass windows or the flicker of torchlight on polished armor, but your body knows what to do. Still, there are days when the weight of the ritual presses heavily upon you, when your appetite withers under the constant association of food with danger. You think of others in the castle, laughing over their meals, savoring flavors without hesitation. That luxury is not yours. For you, every bite is a question. Will this be the one that ends me? And yet, as the meal concludes and the king rises, unharmed, you exhale quietly. Another day survived, but only just. Your role as a royal food taster places you not only in the center of the kitchen, but also in the midst of a silent battlefield. A world of whispers, glances, and hidden agendas. The palace is alive with tension, its grandeur a thin veil over the undercurrents of ambition and fear that run through every corridor. You quickly learn that danger doesn't always come from the food itself. More often, it comes wrapped in smiles, delivered with polished manners and false compliments. Courtiers, nobles, and even members of the royal family might see you as an obstacle or a pawn in their own deadly games. Every meal is a stage for political maneuvering. A dish sent to the king could be a message in disguise, a warning, a threat, or a test of loyalty. You listen carefully to the conversations around the dining hall, picking up on subtle hints, coded language, and the slightest shifts in tone. The knowledge that your survival depends on more than just tasting the food weighs heavily on your mind. You must read the intentions behind every gesture, every word, and every glance. It is a delicate dance, requiring patience, discretion, and an unshakable calm. You recall stories whispered among palace servants, tales of tasters who fell victim not to poison, but to plots hatched in shadowed chambers. Sometimes, a slip of the tongue or an untimely cough could mark you for elimination. Paranoia becomes a constant companion. Yet, you cannot afford to show fear. Your demeanor must remain steady, your movements precise and confident. The king's trust depends on your composure. One tremor of doubt, and you risk not only your position, but your life. You observe the hierarchy of the court, noting alliances and rivalries that influence the flow of power. Some nobles see you as a necessary evil, others as a threat to be eliminated. Your position grants you access, but also exposes you to suspicion. In this world, knowledge is both shield and sword. You gather information discreetly, piecing together fragments of conversations and rumors. This intelligence allows you to anticipate dangers before they reach the dining table. Despite the peril, there are moments of unexpected humanity, a glance of understanding from a sympathetic servant, a shared joke in whispered tones, a fleeting smile that reminds you you are not alone in this precarious existence. Still, the balance is fragile. One wrong move could topple your carefully maintained facade. You carry this burden with quiet resilience, knowing that every day you survive is a victory against unseen enemies. As you prepare for the next meal, you steel yourself once more. The silent threat is ever present, woven into the fabric of palace life. You are not just a taster of food, but a taster of trust, loyalty, and survival. And in this delicate game, your senses are your greatest weapon and your only hope. Your day begins long before the feast. As you prepare for your sacred task, your attention turns to the tools you will use, the simple implements that carry such heavy responsibility. Each one, though unassuming, holds the power to decide life or death. The spoon, for instance, may seem mundane, yet it is your first line of defense, the vessel that brings the unknown directly to your senses. Its cold metal surface feels smooth and steady in your hand, a stark contrast to the tension that coils in your chest. You have learned the precise weight and balance that allow for careful tasting without betraying your unease. Knives and forks are rarely in your hands, but their presence looms. Sharp edges remind you of the fine line you walk between safety and disaster. They are symbols not only of nourishment, but also of threat. Their glint under flickering torchlight can be both reassuring and ominous. In some courts, specialized utensils were fashioned for tasters, small, delicate tools designed to sample food discreetly and efficiently. These bespoke instruments reflect the value placed on your role, even if your status remains low. Beyond utensils, your keenest tools are your senses. Your tongue, your nose, your eyes, all trained to detect the slightest deviation from the expected. A bitter undertone, a faint metallic scent, the unusual texture of a sauce. These subtle cues are your allies in a deadly game. You practice constant mindfulness. Even the faintest distraction could be costly. The murmurs of the kitchen, the clatter of pots, the whisper of silk gowns, all blend into a background hum as your senses sharpen. Historical records tell of tasters using even more drastic methods, biting into morsels, chewing slowly, then discreetly spitting out suspicious food. Some developed rituals of rinsing their mouths with wine or water, though these liquids could not always guarantee safety. You understand the limitations. Poisoners grew clever, learning to mask their deadly brews beneath layers of flavor and spice. Your tools and senses are vital but imperfect shields. This knowledge adds to the quiet dread you carry. Each utensil, each taste, is a challenge to your skill and luck. You respect the weight of your instruments, knowing that with them you hold a fragile barrier between ruler and assassin. Yet, despite the gravity, there is a strange elegance in the ritual. The precision, the focus, the silent choreography. It is a dance you have mastered over countless meals. As you lay out your tools before the next tasting, the quiet clinking echoes in the stillness. You breathe slowly, steadying your nerves. In this moment, the humble spoon feels like a sword. The simplest tool becomes the bearer of your fate. The palace is bustling around you, yet you remain alone in your duty. Despite the crowds of courtiers, servants, and nobles, your position isolates you. There are few who truly understand what it means to live with the constant shadow of death brushing against you. You move silently through the corridors, a ghost tethered to the dining hall. Conversation happens around you, but rarely with you. The whispered suspicions, the laughter, the intrigues, all seem distant, as if you exist in a world apart. This solitude is both a protection and a curse. It keeps you out of the direct crossfire of court politics, but it also deprives you of allies and comfort. You learn to carry your fears quietly, to mask your anxiety beneath a calm exterior. At times, the silence presses in on you. No one discusses your role openly. You are part of the palace, yet apart from it. The courtiers speak in riddles and half-truths, never acknowledging the peril you endure on their behalf. You find moments of strange comfort in routine, the preparation of meals, the arrangement of utensils, the slow, deliberate tasting. These rituals anchor you, providing a rhythm to a life otherwise dictated by uncertainty. Sleep is elusive. The memories of past tasters who failed, of poisoned kings, and the deadly games they played, haunt your dreams. You wake often, heart pounding, to the silence of your chamber. Yet in this isolation, you develop a quiet resilience. The solitude sharpens your senses and your mind. You become attuned to the smallest changes in the air, the faintest variations in color and scent. Your role demands vigilance, not only of the food, but of your own reactions. Fear must be controlled, suspicion tempered with reason. You learn to trust your instincts, while guarding them from the paranoia that threatens to consume you. Occasionally, a servant offers a brief word or a knowing glance. These small gestures are precious, reminders that you are not entirely alone. They are the fragile threads that tie you back to humanity. The palace itself becomes a character in your story, a vast, labyrinthine structure that shelters and traps you. Its stone walls absorb secrets. Its halls echo with footsteps that might be friend or foe. You wonder how many before you have walked this same path, bearing the same burden. The legacy of your profession is one of silence, sacrifice, and invisibility. And yet, it is this silence that protects the throne. The unspoken vigilance you provide ensures the safety of kings and queens, even if no songs are sung in your honor. As you prepare for another day, you carry the weight of this solitude with quiet dignity. Your isolation is both your armor and your cross. And in this stillness, you find the strength to face each meal, each bite, knowing that your survival is the kingdom's unseen safeguard. Though your focus lies on the food before you, you are painfully aware that danger lurks beyond the platter. The threat of poison does not end with what is served. Cups of wine, bowls of broth, even the water you drink can conceal deadly secrets. In the dim light of the banquet hall, you watch not only the dishes, but the hands that prepare and deliver them. Every movement, every glance, becomes a piece of the intricate puzzle you must solve to keep your life and the life of your sovereign intact. Poisons of old were crafted to be subtle, their effects slow and undetectable. Some were tasteless, slipping past even the most vigilant tongue. Others masked by the sweetness of honey or the bitterness of bitter herbs, designed to fool both senses and suspicion. The alchemists and apothecaries who concocted these poisons worked in shadows, perfecting their art with patience and cruelty. Their formulas were guarded secrets, passed down through secretive guilds or whispered in clandestine meetings. You learn to read the nuances, the faint discoloration of a wine's surface, the unusual viscosity of a sauce, the slightest off-note in the fragrance of a stew. It is a constant battle of perception, intuition, and experience. Yet, no matter how skilled, you cannot test every sip or bite for every possible toxin. Some poisons attack the nervous system, others the heart. Some cause agonizing pain, others a peaceful death that can be mistaken for natural causes. This uncertainty breeds a quiet paranoia that settles deep in your bones. You become attuned not just to taste, but to context. Who prepared the meal? What alliances or enmities simmer beneath the polished smiles? Which courtiers watch you too closely? Your vigilance extends beyond the kitchen. Even your water is sourced carefully, sometimes from guarded wells or trusted servants. You drink sparingly, always aware that even the purest-looking cup can harbor death. Stories reach your ears of tasters who succumbed not at the banquet table but in their chambers, victims of delayed poisons or secret plots. Their fates serve as grim reminders of the limits of your craft. Still, your role demands composure. Panic is a luxury you cannot afford. Each meal is a test of patience and nerve, a ritual of cautious tasting, analysis, and silent judgment. You weigh the risks with every bite, knowing that a single misstep can end everything. Your senses become your fortress, your training a shield. And though the threats are unseen, their presence is felt in every breath you take, in every cautious step you make through the corridors of power. You understand now that your true battle is not only with the poisons themselves, but with the human nature that creates them. Fear, ambition, betrayal. The plate before you is only part of the danger. The court is a battlefield of shadows, and you walk its edge with silent determination. As you sit back from the last bite, the quiet settles around you once more. The palace noise fades into a distant murmur, and the weight of your role presses gently on your shoulders. You have survived another day, yet the story does not end here. Throughout history, countless tasters like you have lived in the shadows, silent sentinels whose loyalty was measured only by their survival. They are absent from the grand tales of heroes and kings, their sacrifices overlooked in the songs and stories that echo through the halls of time. But here, in the stillness of your final moments, you remember them. The invisible guardians who bore the poisoned chalice, who tasted the unknown so that others might live. Their courage was quiet, their legacy one of obscurity. Your thoughts drift to the paradox of your existence, to be both essential and invisible, feared yet indispensable. You guard the throne, protect the future, and carry the burden of mistrust, all for a reward as fragile as your breath. And in this paradox lies a strange comfort. For while history may forget your name, the world remembers your purpose. Every life spared, every plot unraveled, every danger averted whispers through the ages like a soft lullaby. You feel a deep gratitude, a silent thankfulness for the modern world you have never known. The safety of meals prepared with care, the absence of hidden threats lurking in shadows, the freedom to eat without fear, to trust the hands that feed you. As your eyelids grow heavy, the day's fears begin to dissolve. The past and present blend into a gentle haze, a quiet place where time slows and peace takes root. Here, in this space between wakefulness and sleep, the tales of poison and peril soften. You find rest not just in your survival, but in the knowledge that your vigilance has shaped history in ways unseen. So let your mind drift now, away from the dangers and doubts, toward calm waters and peaceful nights. Remember the invisible protectors, and take comfort in the fragile gift of life. Sleep finally embraces you, and as you drift deeper, you carry with you the quiet honor of a role that history forgot, but you never did. The flicker of torchlight casts long shadows across the marble halls of Constantinople. Your mind wanders there, to the heart of the Byzantine Empire, where the court shimmered with an opulence that masked the ever-present scent of betrayal. You recall reading of the imperial cubicularioi, the cupbearers of Byzantium. More than mere servants, they were guardians of the emperor's very breath. Every sip of wine, every bite of delicacy passed first through their lips, their senses sharpened not by privilege, but by necessity. These men, often eunuchs, lived within the sanctum of power, yet were forever barred from wielding it, their loyalty ensured by their isolation, their purpose singular, to intercept the assassin's art. You imagine their lives. Cloistered within the labyrinthine corridors of the great palace, they trained to recognize not just the bitterness of hemlock or the sting of arsenic, but also the subtle discoloration of tainted honey, the faintest aroma of tampered wine, a profession refined through centuries of imperial paranoia. And in Byzantium, paranoia was an art form. You think of the famous case of Emperor Basil thus. Legends say his enemies plotted to poison his wine, yet the vigilance of his cupbearer thwarted the attempt. History does not record the name of that vigilant soul, only that the emperor lived and the cupbearer did what countless others had done before and after, swallowed danger so that another might live. There is a certain poetry in that anonymity. The cubicularioi were granted fine garments, silver goblets, perhaps even whispers of gratitude, but like you, they were not honored in mosaics or immortalized in marble friezes. Their lives were spent navigating the precipice between devotion and death, between visibility and erasure. You picture one now, standing at the emperor's side during a grand banquet. The court around them is radiant with silk and gold, but the cupbearer's eyes are not dazzled. They are focused, cautious, aware that even amidst luxury, death could lie waiting in a fig, a slice of lamb, a sip of water. The echoes of their silent labour ripple through time, reaching even you, centuries later, as you sit quietly reflecting on your own role. You are kin to them, not by blood, but by function, by the shared vigilance of those who shield rulers from unseen threats. As you breathe in deeply, allowing the weight of their legacy to settle gently upon your chest, you realize something profound. Even in the most refined courts, where philosophy and theology flourished, the simple primal fear of betrayal persisted. It always will. And so, with this reflection, you let your mind drift from the marble halls of Byzantium, carrying with you the memory of those imperial cupbearers who stood between emperors and eternity. Your thoughts drift from imperial courts to quieter sanctuaries, medieval abbeys nestled in mist-covered valleys, where monks recited psalms as they prepared meals with reverence. Yet even within these sacred walls, the shadow of poison loomed. Few consider that even the most devout communities harbored tensions, rivalries, and silent ambitions. Within these cloisters, food tasters emerged not by formal decree, but by necessity. As monasteries grew in wealth and influence, abbottships became coveted positions, drawing the attention of both noble patrons and power-hungry clerics. You imagine a modest refectory, its wooden tables worn smooth by centuries of prayerful hands. A monk, robed in coarse wool, bows his head not only to bless the meal, but also to taste it. An unspoken ritual designed to shield the abbot from unseen malice. There are no grand titles here, no embroidered tunics or jeweled goblets, only simplicity, devotion, and an awareness of human frailty. The chroniclers of medieval Europe mention cases, whispered through monastery corridors, of rivals slipping tinctures into wine or bread. Herbal poisons, crafted under the guise of medicinal knowledge, turned tools of silent ambition. The very plants grown in monastic gardens for healing could just as easily serve as instruments of death. You picture the monastic taster, moving with quiet precision, trained more by necessity than by formal education. His palate, attuned to the bitter hint of nightshade, or the numbing effect of monkshood, serves as the final safeguard. His vow of obedience extends beyond prayer and labour. It encompasses this silent duty of protection. There is something profoundly human in this juxtaposition. The pursuit of divine transcendence, entwined with the earthbound need to defend against betrayal. You consider how such vigilance might affect the taster's prayers. Does he recite the psalms with the same fervour, knowing each meal could be his last? Or does the daily confrontation with mortality deepen his faith, make each syllable of sacred text more urgent? In these abbeys, where illuminated manuscripts flourished and Gregorian chants rose through stone cloisters, another, less celebrated practice endured: the quiet tasting of food to ensure the safety of the brotherhood's leader. You reflect on how history remembers the abbots who commissioned grand libraries or led theological reforms, but not the anonymous monks who guarded them in silence. The candle's flame flickers as your mind lingers on these forgotten guardians of the sacred table. Like you, they stood between another's life and death, their sacrifices woven invisibly into the fabric of monastic life. With a breath, you let this image dissolve, allowing your thoughts to flow onward, deeper into the medieval world, where trust was always conditional, and vigilance, even in holy places, was an act of devotion. Your mind now wanders to the dim, aromatic chambers of medieval apothecaries, those curious places where medicine and poison shared the same shelf. In these cluttered rooms, beneath beams blackened by centuries of smoke, the taster's most dangerous adversaries refined their art. You picture an apothecary in a bustling medieval town. Jars of dried herbs line the walls: belladonna, hemlock, wolfsbane. Their uses, both healing and lethal, known only to the initiated. A mortar and pestle rest on a worn table, beside iron scales precise enough to measure out salvation or death in the smallest pinch. For every taster seated nervously at a royal table, there was an unseen hand that had prepared the potential poison, blending it with the same meticulous care as any curative tonic. The medieval world teemed with such dualities, physicians who healed and, in secret or under duress, concocted death. The taster's role, then, was not merely to eat, but to stand as a living barrier against the ingenuity of these poisoners. Your thoughts settle on how the taster's senses had to evolve, learning to detect the faintest bitterness hidden in a honeyed pastry, the unexpected tingle of aconite concealed within a roast. There are accounts, you recall, of tasters who developed methods to delay ingestion, using silver pins to test for arsenic or watching for discoloration in wine. But against the most sophisticated apothecaries, who could distill tasteless and odorless toxins, even the most vigilant taster was often powerless. You imagine the quiet tension between these two figures. The apothecary, hidden in the shadows of society, plying their craft in the service of ambition or revenge, and the taster, seated in the light of the court, embodying suspicion and sacrifice. This adversarial relationship, though invisible to the nobles who enjoyed their feasts, defined an entire strata of medieval survival. It was a secret duel fought without swords, just with tinctures, instincts, and nerve. Your gaze drifts to the tools of both trades, the pestle and the fork, the vial and the goblet. Simple objects, yet when combined with human intent, capable of deciding the fates of dynasties. You cannot help but feel an odd kinship with those ancient tasters, anonymous souls who had to outwit not only the plotters at court, but also the scientific ingenuity of the medieval poisoner. As your mind returns to the flickering torchlight of the palace corridors, you carry with you the heavy knowledge that your role was born not only of political paranoia, but also of the quiet brilliance of those who sought to bypass the sword in favor of subtler, more insidious means. And so, once again, you steel yourself, ready to meet this eternal foe across every plate and chalice. Your mind drifts further, sifting through the dust of centuries, recalling some of the most infamous cases where poison turned feasts into funerals, and where tasters either failed or were bypassed entirely. You think of the court of Pope Alexander VI, the infamous Rodrigo Borgia, whose banquets in Renaissance Rome were whispered to be laced with poison. Though not strictly medieval, these tales echo the long tradition of weaponized food. The Borgia family's supposed invention, the cantarella, a slow and subtle poison, became a legend in itself. Yet even in earlier medieval courts, the fear of such methods shaped the role of the taster. Your thoughts settle on King John of England, who died in 1216 after consuming a surfeit of peaches, though some chroniclers speculated that poison hastened his demise. Whether truth or rumour, the possibility of poison was enough to shape royal protocols for centuries to come. Then there was the case of Prince Edward of England, later Edward II, whose court was rife with intrigue. His wife, Isabella of France, earned the nickname the She-Wolf of France, and the suspicion of poison often lurked in their fraught political marriage. Though Edward's demise ultimately came through other grisly means, the chronic fear of poison defined much of his reign. Further east, you recall tales from the Byzantine court, where Empress Irene of Athens allegedly used poison to eliminate rivals, securing her son's position on the throne. The Byzantines, with their sophisticated court rituals, elevated poisoning to a political art, and it was said that imperial tasters were among the most carefully selected and trained individuals in Constantinople. You think too of the tragic case of Eleanor, Duchess of Gloucester, imprisoned after being accused of conspiring to poison King Henry VI through sorcery and alchemy. Though the evidence was likely fabricated, the fear of poison was so entrenched that even accusations sufficed to destroy lives and reshape power dynamics. Each of these tales reminds you that your role is not a paranoid invention, but a grim necessity forged by history. You realize that food, the very symbol of hospitality and life, has always carried this darker potential. A single bite could bring down a king, unravel a dynasty, or ignite a war. And in each of these historical moments, someone like you was there, perhaps unnoticed, perhaps forgotten, but nonetheless present, tasting the wine, breaking the bread, standing between power and peril. Your fingers subconsciously brush your lips, as though tasting the air itself for hidden threats. The tradition you uphold is not simply about survival. It is about preserving the fragile order upon which kingdoms are built. The feast may be sumptuous, the hall grand, the music sweet, but beneath it all, there is always the possibility of death in disguise. And so, as your thoughts return to the quiet chamber where you prepare for another day, you acknowledge the long, unbroken chain of tasters who came before you, and those who will follow after. Before sleep can claim you fully, your mind wanders to the unwritten code that governs your daily life, a discipline refined through centuries, practiced by generations of those who shared your burden. It is not a code recorded in tomes or decreed by kings, but rather a silent ritual passed from one taster to another. Gestures, instincts, and small, deliberate acts that together form your armor against death. You remember the first time you were trained to observe the color of wine before anything else. Not for its bouquet or vintage, as a noble might, but for the telltale sheen of oil floating on the surface, a signature left by many poisons. The slightest iridescence in the torchlight could be a warning, more urgent than any shouted alarm. The bread must be broken by hand, never cut with a knife already used in another dish. Your fingers trace invisible patterns over plates and goblets, seeking the faintest residue of foreign powders or unfamiliar scents. Almond from bitter cyanide, metal from arsenic, earth from hemlock. Every movement, every examination is slow and methodical. You have learned to taste with caution, to let the smallest morsel rest on your tongue, waiting for the prick of numbness, the tingle of something amiss. Seconds stretch into minutes, and in those moments, the hall may be filled with laughter, music, or the clatter of feasting. But for you, there is only silence, only focus. You remember stories from long ago, of tasters who employed silver spoons, believed to tarnish upon contact with certain toxins. Others carried caged birds, offering them crumbs from royal platters to see if they would sing or fall silent. Yet you know that such methods offer only the illusion of safety. The true defense is vigilance, a mind attuned to suspicion, and an unflinching acceptance of risk. Your predecessors understood this well. The taster's life is not measured in years, but in meals survived. Each breakfast, each banquet, each late-night supper is another crossing of the threshold between life and death. And there are rules beyond the physical. You must not grow too close to your sovereign. Affection clouds judgment, dulls the edge of precaution. Nor can you afford to become jaded, for complacency is the poison you cannot taste. So you remain in the quiet in-between, intimately connected to your master's survival, yet always apart, always watchful. As your eyes grow heavier, you think of how these rituals have become second nature, so ingrained that even now, lying safely in your own chambers, you find yourself rehearsing them mentally. Observe, test, taste, wait. You understand that these small acts are not merely precautions, but tributes, homages to those who came before, whose caution preserved kings and kingdoms, whose failures altered the course of history. And with that final thought, you let your body relax, knowing that tomorrow you will rise once more to perform the same ancient rites, quiet, invisible, indispensable. Sleep teases at the edges of your mind, but still it evades you, held back by the quiet procession of history. You think of those who stood on the opposite side of your role, not the tasters, but the poisoners. They too are part of your story. In the medieval courts of Europe, poisoners were often more than mere criminals. They were artisans of death, wielding knowledge of herbs, minerals, and venoms with surgical precision. Their skills were coveted by nobles, feared by commoners, and whispered about in every great hall. You recall the tales of the infamous Borgia family of Renaissance Italy, masters of intrigue, accused of wielding poison as a political tool as deftly as they wielded alliances. Though much of their legend may be exaggerated, there is no denying that they embodied an era when poison was the weapon of the subtle and the patient. Even in distant lands, similar figures emerged. In medieval Russia, rumors swirled around the court of Ivan the Terrible. His oprichniki, agents of secret terror, were said to have employed poison among their many methods of eliminating the Tsar's enemies. No blade, no army was as effective as a cup of wine or a simple bowl of stew laced with death. You reflect on how poisoners thrived not on brute strength, but on knowledge. They understood the properties of nightshade, the slow burn of arsenic, the deceptive sweetness of glycol compounds. Some were healers turned killers, alchemists tempted by power, or servants coerced by their lords. Their genius lay not in open confrontation, but in creating deaths that mimicked natural causes: fevers, seizures, wasting illnesses. Death by poison often carried the advantage of plausible deniability, a gift to those who sought to rid themselves of rivals without raising suspicion. And yet, for every successful poisoner, there was a taster like you, standing as the last line of defense, a quiet battle, unseen by the world, played out in kitchens and banquet halls across centuries. It was not fought with swords or banners, but with instincts, with discipline, and sometimes with sheer luck. You ponder the strange intimacy of this relationship. Though you never meet them, you know the minds of poisoners better than most. You understand how they think, how they hide their work. In some ways, you are opposites, but also twins, both existing in the shadows, both shaping the fates of empires. This thought brings a curious comfort. Your vigilance, your role, is what kept the ambitions of poisoners in check. Without you, history might have unraveled very differently. As the chamber darkens further and the fire burns low, you breathe deeply, imagining those silent duels of mind and method playing out across generations. You are part of that lineage, a counterforce to the hidden artisans of death. And finally, with that quiet reflection, your eyes begin to close. Your breath slows, your body relaxing, but your mind still lingers in the labyrinth of history. You picture the silent arsenal that poisoners of the medieval world carried, not in weapons belts or scabbards, but in vials, powders and tinctures hidden within folds of fabric or secret compartments. The medieval poisoner's toolkit was both humble and deadly. There was belladonna, its dark berries beautiful but lethal. A few drops slipped into wine could dilate pupils and quicken the heart, causing delirium, then death. There was arsenic, called the king of poisons, odorless, tasteless, and easy to disguise in food or drink. Powdered arsenic could sit innocently in a spice jar or be mixed with flour, indistinguishable to all but the most discerning. You remember stories of aconite, also known as wolfsbane, prized by medieval poisoners for its swift and brutal efficiency. It was often harvested under the light of a full moon by those who understood its dangers and respected its potency. Just a touch on broken skin could be fatal. Poisoners were also apothecaries and herbalists, their knowledge often indistinguishable from that of healers. In medieval courts, where medicine and poison shared many of the same roots, this ambiguity made them all the more dangerous. A tonic for health could become, with only a subtle change in concentration, a draught of death. Some poisoners specialized in slow-acting agents, designed not to kill immediately, but to erode vitality over days or weeks, mimicking wasting illnesses. Others favored speed, a sudden convulsion at the banquet table, a monarch collapsing mid-toast. But beyond the tools, you reflect on the rituals, the careful preparation, the testing on animals, the endless refinement of dosages. It was a discipline that required patience, precision, and above all, discretion. No court tolerated open acts of murder, but the quiet work of a poisoner could pass undetected for years. Your role, your vigilance, existed because of these tools and their masters. Every meal was a question, every cup of wine, every piece of bread, a potential vessel of unseen death. You think of the tasters who came before you, those who lived and those who didn't, all engaged in the same silent dialogue with these tools and their makers. The castle kitchens were often the battlefield, the poisoner's ingenuity against the taster's senses. A war fought not with armies, but through subtleties of flavour, texture, and instinct. And yet, despite your training, despite all your caution, you know that perfection is impossible. The poisoner only has to succeed once. The taster must succeed every time. As this truth settles upon you, like a familiar cloak, you finally begin to feel the heaviness of rest overtaking your thoughts. The fire has burned down to coals, the night embracing the castle in stillness. You are part of this story, an ancient struggle between life and death, vigilance and deception. And as your breathing deepens, the final image in your mind is of that simple toolkit. Quiet, unassuming, and yet, in its own way, more powerful than any sword. As you sink deeper into the quiet night, your thoughts turn to the world behind the banquet tables, the secret realm of the castle kitchen, where shadows stretched longer than any torchlight. It was here that the fate of kings and queens could be decided long before the first dish ever touched the royal lips. Medieval kitchens were vast and busy, filled with the clang of iron pots and the hiss of flames. Yet beneath this bustling surface hid a darker truth. Every meal was prepared under watchful eyes, not only of cooks and servants, but of those who served a silent, deadly purpose. You imagine the kitchens as a stage where intrigue played out in whispered conversations and furtive glances. The cooks, often underpaid and overlooked, might also be coerced or bribed into becoming agents of poison. Their knives were not only for slicing meat, but also for slicing through the fragile trust that held the court together. In some castles, the kitchen was divided into sections, each responsible for a different course or element of the feast. This fragmentation was meant to reduce risk, to ensure no single person had full control over the meal's preparation. Yet even this was not a foolproof defense. You recall tales of nobles who, suspicious of the chefs, brought their own personal attendants to oversee the cooking. But even these guards could be compromised. The palace was a web of loyalties and betrayals, where a single whisper could ripple through the stone halls like wildfire. The taster's role was crucial here, but it was far from the only safeguard. Herbs were carefully inspected. Spices were sourced from distant lands to avoid local tampering. Wine was stored in secured cellars, and water was boiled before use to kill unseen dangers. Yet poisoners were clever. They learned to disguise their toxins in the richest sauces and the most fragrant herbs. A hint of deadly nightshade could be masked beneath a swirl of cinnamon or a dash of saffron. And so, you stand in this imagined kitchen, your senses alert. You feel the heat from the hearths, smell the mingling aromas of roasting meats and baking bread. But beneath it all, a tension lingers, the tension of unseen threats lurking just out of sight. This world of the medieval kitchen was a place of contradictions, nourishment and danger, loyalty and treachery, life and death. Every spoonful was a gamble, every bite a test. As the night deepens, you feel the weight of this hidden history pressing gently on your mind. The kitchen was not merely a place to prepare food. It was a battlefield where the quiet war between protector and poisoner was waged. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you carry with you this understanding, that even in the midst of feast and celebration, the shadows whispered warnings to those who dared to listen. The night settles softly around you, and your thoughts drift to those who moved silently through the corridors of power. The trusted servants who played roles as vital as the royal food tasters, but lived in even greater obscurity. In medieval courts, trust was a rare commodity. The palace was a stage of constant watchfulness, where loyalty could shift like the flicker of a candle's flame. The food taster was but one part of a larger network of silent guardians who stood between the monarch and unseen enemies. You picture the steward overseeing every detail of the household, a figure both respected and feared. Their duty was to manage the servants, secure the storerooms, and, crucially, to ensure the safety of the royal table. Their eyes were always open, alert for any sign of betrayal or danger. Then, there were the chamberlains, who controlled access to the monarch's private chambers and often acted as gatekeepers of trust. They coordinated the movements of courtiers, spies, and messengers, all while maintaining the delicate balance of favor and suspicion that defined court life. In some courts, secret inspectors were appointed, moving unseen through the kitchens, cellars, and serving chambers. They tested the food and drink, sometimes sampling it themselves in disguise, to protect the sovereign from harm. The taster, though exposed to the greatest physical risk, relied heavily on this network. Their role was the final barrier, a living shield between poison and king. Yet they could not work alone. You consider how these servants communicated, often through coded signals or subtle gestures known only within the palace walls. A slight hesitation in a bow, a whispered word in the corridor, could alert them to potential threats. Despite the ever-present dangers, these silent guardians carried out their duties with quiet resolve. They understood that their loyalty was measured not in rewards or praise, but in the fragile survival of the ruler. And yet, this survival came at a steep cost. The atmosphere in the court was heavy with mistrust, and even the closest allies could become suspects. Paranoia shaped every decision, and the line between protector and traitor was dangerously thin. As your mind explores this hidden world, you feel a sense of solemn respect for these unsung heroes. Their vigilance was a delicate dance, balancing secrecy, suspicion, and devotion in equal measure. This network of silent guardians formed the unseen backbone of royal security. Without them, the monarch's life would have been far more vulnerable to the poisoner's cruel hand. As sleep begins to claim you, you carry with you this quiet truth, that history's great rulers owed their lives not only to warriors and generals, but to the shadowy figures whose names were never recorded, whose stories were lost in the echoes of time. Their legacy is one of silent sacrifice, their courage whispered in the stillness of forgotten halls. The court's splendor hides a darker truth, a labyrinth of intrigue where poison is as much a tool of power as the sword. As you lie in the quiet after another day's vigilance, your thoughts return to the endless dance of politics that swirled around the royal table. In medieval times, poison was not merely a weapon, but a language. It spoke of betrayal, ambition, and desperate gambits for control. The food taster's role was more than survival. It was a constant negotiation between trust and treachery. You imagine the courtiers, noble lords and ladies, draped in their finest silks, masks of civility, barely concealing their true intentions. Each bite they offered to the sovereign might carry a hidden message, a calculated risk. Some poisons were swift and merciless, designed to kill before the victim could cry out. Others were slow, cruelly lingering, designed to weaken and torment over time. The apothecaries, skilled in the deadly art, served both king and conspirator alike. In the great halls, where political alliances were forged over feasts and wine, the food taster stood silently, the first line of defense against the invisible enemy. Their senses sharpened beyond the ordinary, trained to detect the faintest bitterness, the subtlest change in flavor. You consider how poison shaped the very course of history. Kings who fell mysteriously ill, queens whose deaths sparked wars, and heirs who vanished without a trace, all linked by the unseen hand of slow-acting venom. Yet the taster's duty was not simply to detect poison, but to navigate the shifting tides of power. To serve a ruler whose closest advisors might harbor deadly secrets required not only courage, but cunning. The court was a place where loyalty was often a mask worn for survival. Friends could become foes overnight. Every meal was a test of faith, every sip a gamble. As you drift deeper, the image of the royal table emerges once more. The glint of gilded plates, the shimmer of crystal goblets, and the silent figure of the taster. Ever watchful, ever alone. The world outside sleeps, but within these walls, danger never rests. The taster's vigilance must remain unbroken, a quiet sentinel against the shadows that gather just beyond the flicker of candlelight. And in this solemn role, you find a strange kinship, an understanding that the safety of a realm can depend on a single moment of perception, on a single decision to swallow or to refuse. This is the burden you carry, to protect life by risking your own, to stand guard at the threshold of trust and death. The night deepens, and with it, a fragile peace settles. For now, the poison remains hidden, the plots still whispered. But tomorrow will bring new challenges, and the dance continues. You breathe in the silence, finding comfort in the shadows. The role of the food taster was often unseen, unspoken, a silent watcher in the grand theatre of the medieval court. Though hidden in the shadows, your presence was vital, a quiet force that shaped the fate of kings and kingdoms. You think of stories passed down through time, whispered in the quiet corners of castle halls. Tales of royal tasters who lived lives of paradox, revered for their importance, yet feared for the danger that surrounded them. In 14th century Europe, the plague swept through lands, turning the familiar world into a landscape of death and suspicion. It was said that some monarchs grew paranoid, surrounding themselves with tasters who tested not only their food, but also their medicines. Trust was scarce, and every bite might bring death. You recall a story from the court of King Charles VI of France, known as Charles the Mad. His paranoia deepened as his mind faltered, and those closest to him lived in constant fear. It is said that his tasters worked tirelessly, their senses sharpened by dread, protecting the fragile king from imagined and real poisons alike. Elsewhere, in the cold castles of northern Europe, your counterparts faced different dangers. Rival noble houses plotted silently, their schemes cloaked beneath layers of politeness and protocol. A single meal could change the course of a dynasty. You think of the taster's solitude, the loneliness of a life lived in service to a sovereign's safety. No songs were sung for them in the great halls, no feasts held in their honor. Their reward was quiet survival, a life balanced on the knife's edge. Yet despite this, their duty was clear. Each day, they stood guard against a threat as old as power itself, betrayal. You imagine the kitchens bustling with activity, the clatter of pots and pans, the murmur of cooks preparing dishes rich with spices and herbs. It was here that the taster's senses came alive, detecting the faintest trace of poison amidst the complex flavors. Their training was rigorous. From youth, they learned the bitter taste of hemlock, the acrid tang of arsenic, the slow burn of aconite. They memorized recipes and antidotes, becoming living libraries of both danger and defense. But knowledge alone was not enough. The taster had to trust their instincts, that silent voice within that whispered when something was wrong. As your thoughts drift on, you understand the paradox again. A life of hidden peril, yet profound purpose.